What's up, guys? In today's video, I am highlighting the first trimester of pregnancy, the good, the bad, and perhaps the downright ugly. I'm currently 28 weeks pregnant with our second baby, so I've been out of the first trimester for quite some time. So I thought I'd hop on here, go back, and try and give you some insight, share some personal experiences, and let you know what it was like for me. The first trimester is week 4 to week 13, and I really tried to break things down week by week to give you a good idea of what these weeks look like for me. So if you're newly pregnant, planning to be pregnant, or you're just curious, grab your tea, your coffee, or your snacks and come sit with me. I hope you'll find this video useful. So one of the most glaring symptoms during this time for me was hunger. Really intense hunger pangs. I was hungry all the time. I work on a busy surgical floor at a hospital, so I was constantly on the go, burning calories, and I just remember by the time my break would come around, I felt like I could eat a whole cow. I was starving, and this is after making sure to have a really big breakfast. Like, I would eat breakfast at home in the morning, and sometimes I would have something like 2 boiled eggs on my commute to work, trying to fill up my reserve, but it was almost like within a few hours, I would be ready to go to a buffet. I was hungry all the time. So really intense hunger pangs was a glaring symptoms during this time. Also, around this time, I experienced bloating. I was very uncomfortable. Like, I could have a piece of toast or something really small, and I would feel so expanded, like my stomach would feel so big, like a hot air balloon. But starting my day off with a cup of hot water or having a cup of hot water before or after meals would really help. And obviously trying to avoid gaseous foods as much as possible, like whole wheat, bran, broccoli, onions. That helped too, but realistically, that's really hard to do. And lastly, in week 4 or 5, my last big symptom was very intense cramping. My lower abdomen and uterus just felt so heavy and so full all the time. Like they almost felt like period cramps, like full-blown cramps. So much so that I would question myself and think, like, am I crazy? Am I pregnant, or am I about to just get my period? I would get into bed and would be feeling pain, like I would want to use the heating pad. I didn't take anything for these cramps. A hot shower would usually do the trick. And the cramping eventually did subside as I moved into week 6. So week 6 was really the week when things started to ramp up for me. New symptoms popped up, namely nausea and morning sickness. And this was by far the most debilitating and honestly downright awful symptom that I experienced with both pregnancies. Nausea had the most far-reaching effect on my quality of life. As mentioned, this is my second pregnancy, so with my first, it was almost textbook. The literature says morning sickness tends to appear around week 6, and exactly 6 weeks in, I was so nauseous for so long, it was hard to keep anything down. So with this pregnancy, at the end of week 5, I was feeling okay. And I was thinking like, okay, maybe I'll be one of those women who have this different experience. And the second time around, maybe my train will skip that station. But clearly the joke was on me. I was wrong. And at exactly 6 weeks and 1 day, the nausea hit me like a ton of bricks. And it wasn't just in the morning, even though it's called morning sickness. It was literally all day. And literature will tell you that most women experience nausea from week 6 to around week 12, when your hormones will start to level off. But every woman and every pregnancy is different. So for me, I was nauseous from week 6 all the way to around week 22 to week 23. I know some women who feel sick for a few days in week 6, and then they feel great going forward. And then some women are sick from week 4 all the way up until they deliver. It just really depends. But for me, it definitely lasted well into my second trimester. And to compound that, my sensitivity to smell was super heightened, and so many things would set my nausea off. So at the hospital, while I was working, I'm dealing with drains, pouches like ostomies, dressings and wound care, etc. And these scents would honestly send me spiraling. And I look back at that time and I thank God that masks were mandated. Not only did these masks act as somewhat of a barrier from these scents, but they also hid the discomfort on my face when I had to, let's say, do a dressing change. Like, it was that bad. And outside of this, I found that dabbing a little bit of peppermint oil inside of my mask really helped in easing my stomach and allowed me to get through the day. So honestly, shout out to peppermint oil for real. Another thing I found that was very helpful was trying to keep my blood sugar balanced as much as possible throughout the day, because I found that if I allowed myself to get hungry, that is when the nausea would come on full blown. And once it was full blown, it was way harder to manage. So always having breakfast, and even if it was a piece of toast with a little bit of butter, then so be it. My OB really enforced to me during that time that the first trimester is really about survival. And when it comes to nausea, just eat what you can and don't put the pressure on yourself. So I really just ate what I could when I could. But with that being said, I did try and focus on eating smaller, more frequent meals. So maybe eating 6 smaller meals a day instead of the traditional breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I would focus on quality snacks. So when my nausea was behaving and I could stomach it, I would have something like Greek yogurt with granola and berries. I know it can be really tempting with the first trimester cravings. You might want to reach for that donut. But I did try to avoid foods like this because I knew they would just spike my blood sugar, and a spike in blood sugar will eventually produce a dip in your blood sugar to the same degree. And I knew that that would aggravate my nausea. But at the same time, I'm also human and I think life is to be lived. So sometimes I would straight up have that donut knowing what was in store, and I would just deal with it. Like many things in life, everything in moderation, but it was just tough and a very weird space to be in. It was very ironic. It's like the irony of food being the only thing that will help you with your nausea, but you can't eat food because you're nauseous. So it's like, what do you do? But just do the best you can and give yourself grace as you're going through this time. Outside of this, I would also cut up raw ginger and suck on them like candies. And that honestly did help. I know you can buy actual ginger candy at the grocery store if you prefer, but for me, I preferred raw ginger because of the more intense taste. I felt like that did a better job at curbing my nausea, and it was cheaper and it had less sugar. So raw ginger was the route that I opted for. And then lastly, of course, there are pharmacological options you can explore with your healthcare provider. Namely, the medication diclectin is a very popular anti-nausea medication that many OBs will prescribe. It's the combination of vitamin B6 and Unisom, and oftentimes it's really effective at treating morning sickness and nausea. I did use this in combination with the other methods I just mentioned, and I had great success. I found that taking it not only gave me relief, but it allowed me to actually eat and keep the food down. And because my nausea was the worst when I would first wake up, I would take it at bedtime. And so by the time I woke up, my nausea was controlled and I could have a really good breakfast. So I am a supporter of diclectin. And if you are interested, I encourage you to reach out to your healthcare provider and explore what options are available to you. And I wanted to touch on cravings quickly because pregnancy cravings are definitely a thing. I was so nauseous all the time that I didn't really have cravings, but when I did, I feel like I just wanted a really big bowl of noodles, like the authentic hand-pulled noodles, or even like a bowl of pho. And I just remember my husband would always be like, "You want noodles again? We just had noodles." And I would be like,
I just wanted to tell you that I am pregnant.
I definitely milked that, and I'm still milking it, to be honest. Like, I'm growing a human. So if you're pregnant, you're growing a human and you're allowed to milk that too. But yeah, everything else kind of turned me off. Meat, I was so turned off by meat in my first trimester. I still kind of am. I mean, I'll eat it, but I usually tend to have less meat on my plate. Chicken especially grossed me out. Outside of noodles, I enjoyed my carbs. Even outside of pregnancy, I am a carb queen. So I love the breads, the pastas, the rice, all the refined carbs that they caution you against. I love it all. But like I said, I did the best with what I could, and I would try to balance it out with nutritious meals and snacks when I could. The last symptom that week 6 introduced was fatigue. Really intense bone-crushing fatigue. I was tired all the time, which makes sense when we think about everything that's happening on the inside, all of the internal processes. I feel like I would sleep 6-7 hours and still wake up feeling like I had been up for 24 hours straight. And this was exacerbated by working full-time on a busy acute unit in the hospital. I would get to work for 7 a.m. and essentially hit the ground running. It would be nonstop for my entire shift. Then by the time I got home, I was so spent, so exhausted. And then all of this was also compounded by the fact that we have a toddler. With my first pregnancy, if and when I was feeling tired, I kind of had that luxury of taking it easy and maybe we could get takeout and call it a night. But with the toddler, those luxuries are simply not there. Like you work a full day and you want to come home, shower, get into your bed, maybe watch a movie. But that's just not the reality. You're getting home and you're pulling a second shift. You have a home life that needs tending to. And this is with a very supportive husband and support from our extended family. I still found that the fatigue was very debilitating, very intense, and all I could do was rest as much as possible. We would plan easy, little to no prep meals, or we would do takeout if and when we could. And we would tag team our evening routine with our little ones so that I could get to bed at a decent hour. And all of these things, they did help, but ultimately I was just exhausted all the time and I just had to ride that wave and pray that the fatigue would level off as I neared my second trimester, which thankfully it did. So that was week 6. Lots going on, a lot of changes. It was a very pivotal week for me. In my 7th week, the main symptom for me was spotting. I experienced spotting with both pregnancies, and the second time around was just as scary as the first. Thankfully, everything turned out to be okay, but spotting, no matter the degree, if it's a little bit, if it's a lot, it is something that warrants medical attention, not only to make sure that baby is okay, but also for your peace of mind. Because like many women, when I was spotting, my mind was going to the worst case scenario. Even though I had been through this before and everything turned out to be okay, I was still thinking like, it's still early. Is this it? Am I saying goodbye? So it was definitely a stressful time. It's a very common symptom, but it's really important that you get it checked out. Week 7 also brought on urinary frequency for me. I had to pee all the time. It seemed like every hour. I was up 2 to 3 times a night to use the washroom, which didn't help with the fatigue that was already going on. There's not much I could do to alleviate this, but I would try to not drink too much water before going to bed, try not to interrupt my sleep, and now even in my 3rd trimester, it hasn't really leveled off, which is to be expected. As baby's getting bigger, there's less real estate, baby's compressing my bladder, so I'm using the washroom all the time. It is what it is. I also experienced breast tenderness in my 7th week. So tender that sometimes movement alone would cause discomfort. Clothing, someone or something rubbing up on you the wrong way, it would make me cringe. I would be so happy to come home and change out of my scrubs, which I felt were so restricting. The tenderness was not fun and eventually leveled off around week 14, 15 for me. I still do have bouts of tenderness, but it's very intermittent at this point, whereas in my 1st trimester, I found that it was all the time. Week 8 was just a continuation of the symptoms I mentioned. The only new thing I experienced were vivid dreams and the odd nightmare. They were so vivid. Like I remember one night I sat up out of bed and I had to ask myself, was that real or is this reality? These dreams are so clear and sometimes they can be very disturbing. I know many women experience vivid dreams, and I read somewhere that this can be attributed to the rise in hormones. Also life changes, memories, fears, anxieties, all of which is heightened during this time, but the vivid dreams are seriously no joke. They can be downright scary. And then week 9 to 13 was really, again, just a continuation of the symptoms we talked about and just me riding the waves and going through the motions. By this time, I felt like I had a good handle on my symptoms and I knew how to tend to them. I had a good idea of what my triggers were and things I could do to ease them. I tried to stay in a good headspace, and I knew that each week I was getting closer to the 2nd trimester and to the point where the risk of pregnancy loss significantly decreases. Also, I was looking forward to the 2nd trimester scans where we would get to see images of our baby. So that really kept me going. Yeah, I just took it day by day and did the best I could with what I had. So echoing what my OB told me, the first trimester is strictly about survival for your growing embryo and for you too. There is so much going on inside our bodies. So I just think it's important that we slow down and give ourselves some grace. Don't be fooled by mainstream media. They'll have you thinking that pregnancy is so easy and you'll look and feel like $1 million. You'll have this cute little bump and wear these cute little dresses. And maybe you'll feel sick for a day and have this angelic glow, which yes, is the case for many women. But for many women, the complete opposite is true. And pregnancy is hard, from morning sickness to mood changes, skin changes, weight fluctuations, your body may swell up, pain, potential complications. Pregnancy is a very beautiful time, but it can be a very difficult time. Two things can be true, and I think it's important that we recognize that, especially in the age of TikTok and Instagram, where people are showing us perfectly curated snapshots of their picture-perfect lives. So if you're expecting and you're going through it, I want to tell you that you are doing a great job. You're doing amazing. I remember with my first baby, when I was really going through it, my mom would always tell me, keep going, stay strong. The moment your baby is out and you hold them for the first time, everything else will melt away. The pain, the discomfort, the morning sickness, it all fades to black and suddenly it all becomes worth it. And she was absolutely right. I remember thinking I would do the first trimester all over again, knowing I got to hold my sweet baby girl at the end of it all. And sure enough, I did do it again because we're here for round 2. So the first trimester sucked, but it brought me closer to our baby and I really can't wait. So that was my first trimester experience. The second time around, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. If you're currently expecting, if you're in your first trimester, or even in your second or third, please leave a comment and share your experiences. There's something so comforting about shared experiences and knowing that other women out there can relate to you. So this video was the first of a 3-video series. I'll be putting out 2 more videos that will touch on the second and third trimester. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.